Hello everyone and welcome back to the devlog for my upcoming city builder game. It's been an interesting week with a few roadblocks. Before we hop into it, please subscribe to the channel if you'd like to keep up with the progress of the game. And if you like the video, please don't be scared to let me know by hitting that like button down below. Now let's take a look at this week's progress. We finished up last week by adding citizens to the game, and it felt natural to me to then follow up by adding some UI to account for them. So that's where I started. I started out by building a very simple UI that simply just took them all and displayed their names on the UI. And then I got thinking about scaling and adding additional members of the population. And that led me on a journey to look into how to create UI elements dynamically. I was able to figure it out, and that's going to be helpful not only in this case, but in other cases as well. Next, I started implementing the ability to assign citizens to buildings for work. And this is going to be a very critical part of the game. The player will have access to their citizens and be able to assign them to various buildings to complete various tasks. Right now we already have a few structures that will help us with interacting with the citizens. We've got the farm, we've got the work camp, and we've got the mill. And so we can at least start working on a base skeleton of the code that we'll want to execute for all of these various buildings when workers are assigned to them completing tasks. It ended up being a lot more complex than I thought it should have been, and in hindsight I think that I should have structured the hierarchy for the building actors a little bit differently. But at this point I'm just going to work around it. After finally coming to terms with and understanding my earlier mistakes, I was able to get workers assigned to the farm, complete with a green check mark when workers are assigned. And now for some fun news. I started working on getting the Steam page approved. That means I needed to pick a name. I landed on Real Communism, as the twist on the city builder will be in the context of a satirical communist utopia. As of the time of this recording, it has not yet been approved, but I'll be sure to update you as soon as I can. I rendered some images in Blender to use as graphical assets for the page. After not liking the text in Blender, I used Photoshop to polish it up a little bit, and here's what I ended up with. As a smaller project, I also worked a bit more on the lighting this week. I mainly wanted to focus on creating more of a sun-like movement to cast shadows in different directions based on the time of day. And now we get to where most of my time went this week. The rest of this week was mostly dedicated to getting citizens to be in the places that they should be. For example, at work. And this took way more time than I expected. It didn't take long to get down a basic move from point A to point B type system. And even before building that system, I knew that it wasn't going to be perfect. After building it, it just was super obvious that it needed to be done. So I started to look for a method for pathfinding, and it was a nightmare. At one point, I totally broke the citizens in the game, and I had to basically rebuild the basic point A to point B structure. And once I finally got that back to where it was, I pushed off pathfinding to a later date and added assigning and destination functionality to the work camp and the house as well. Once I got the house set up, I started working on the public pods. These will be residential buildings for citizens that will be more efficient for the player in terms of space and materials. Each public pod building has 3 residences within it, but it will have some trade-offs. For example, to start the game, citizens will not be permitted to live together if they aren't married. If the player wants to house a single citizen in a public pod, they can, but it will potentially take away a residence for a married couple. In addition, married couples will not be able to have children while living in the public pods. They will need to be moved into a house in order to gain access to that perk. This system isn't finalized by any means, but it's the general idea I have in mind when designing housing for the game. I ended up not having time to implement the functionality into the public pods, but here's a time lapse of citizens going to work and returning home with the updated lighting system. This week I got bogged down a few times by aspects of Unreal Engine that I'm not totally familiar working with yet. That's to be expected as I get more familiar with this engine. All in all, it's not a bad week, I just had higher expectations for myself. And as I get deeper into the game, things will likely just get more complicated. That said, I've got another Friday off this week, so I'm looking forward to a hopefully pretty productive week. Be on the lookout for the Steam page launch, as I'm expecting it to get approved at some point this week. And if you want to know the second it does get approved, you can follow me on X/Twitter at Hayden and Marlowe _, where I post more frequent updates. And if you like the video and you want to keep up with the progress of this game, please subscribe to the channel. It means a lot to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.